things change, and I think it's really important in all theatre and in all rehearsal spaces to just be open to whatever ends up happening.
Hi, Virge, how are you?
Hello, Russell. I'm absolutely fine. Nice to see you.
Good. Thank you very much for coming on the channel today.
It's my pleasure.
You're going to talk to us about performing and kind of creating and being involved in the creation of new musical theatre, because you've done a few over your time. Before we get into that, though, tell us about you. Kind of how do you categorize yourself? Are you an actress, an actor, a performer, a voiceover? I know you do lots of things. So how do you see yourself these days?
Oh my goodness. I consider myself a jobbing actress, really. I started a long time ago. And then I took a break when I had children from theatre. I carried on doing bits of filming, voiceovers, but didn't do theatre for quite a while because I just, going to be honest, I just sort of couldn't afford it. I waited until my older son was legally old enough to be left alone with his brother. And then I went back to work, and the first show and it was very interesting to come back actually and see how much the landscape had changed. Because when I first started, anything that wasn't West End was sort of, oh no, that's, I don't want to do that. And then when I came back, suddenly the Fringe had become a thing, or off West End, or whatever you want to call it now, had become a thing. And I was slightly sort of, what? And one of the first jobs I got when I came back that was theatre rather than filming was at the Union. And I was very happy to get the job because it was nice to be working again. It was a musical called First Lady Suite, which I'm not sure we were the first UK production, but it was unknown territory for me. I didn't know the show, wasn't familiar with new musicals. It was a Michael John McHugh's musical, incredibly difficult music. And I was surprised to discover that I was in the company of serious West End performers who were all happily working for very little, sort of a bit more than expenses and travel, to do this musical because they wanted to do it. And it was about the wives of American presidents. And that was just really interesting how the landscape had changed while I'd been gone, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Because when I first started, you would never have worked just for sort of expenses and a bit more than that. You'd have gone, what? I'm not doing that. Just because in the late 80s, early 90s, that just wasn't a thing. So that was quite interesting for me to come back at when was it? 2000, when did I do it? 2009, I think it was. Yeah, 2009. And all the big casting directors came, and it was a wake-up call to me that actually this is how the business does work now, that if you want to do interesting work and get people to come and see you, because of course it's in London, and it was just very interesting from that point of view. And also musically, the music was fiendishly difficult. As lovely other actress who was in it, who's been in tons of West End shows, she said, it's the only show I've ever done where we're still counting in our shoes on the last night, counting with your toes so that people can't see you, kind of going 1, 2, 3. When do I come in? Where's my note?
Oh, really?
So that was my sort of reintroduction to theatre, if you like. And then on the back of that, well, not on the back of it, but sort of the next theatre job I did after that also happened to be a musical, and a new musical.
Right.
And that was sort of to come to your next, what I think is going to be your next question about new work.
Yeah.
I really like doing new work. I like the idea that you can't find a recording and so on. I suppose possibly I'm quite lucky that I play the piano, so I can sit and play whatever my number might be, or musically have that. And I'm aware that lots of people don't, but everybody has different ways of learning. But I like to sit with the score and play it. And I'm not a brilliant pianist, but I'm good enough to pick out my bits, and that's incredibly useful. And I think it's really interesting being in the room, particularly if the composer is there. Composer and lyricist, or maybe that is the same person or more than one person. but also an MD and also a director. And it's a fine line, because it's a, you know, there's a sort of certain amount of jostling for position, and it's always a tricky one, isn't it? It's a wonderful thing, but do you listen to the note that the composer gave you, or do you listen to the note the director gave you, or the note that the MD gave you? Because these may all be slightly different.
Yeah.
And that's always quite interesting and can throw up all sorts of things that are always going to keep the rehearsal room quite kind of buzzy and interesting. So I like that. Lots of people don't.
Yeah, definitely. So you're most certainly a performer of the theatre, and I know you do voiceover as well, and you're screen, you're doing The Crown at the moment, I think, or you've just finished a stint on The Crown. So what we'll do, we'll dig down now in what you just said about new musical theatre. Okay. So if you get when you get a job in a new musical and you get given, you know, the notes or the tracks or whatever, I've always imagine, is it more difficult because you've kind of got nowhere to go? You know, if you go and do Kiss Me Kate, you can go and buy a CD of the original and then off you go with your headphones. So how do you deal with a brand new song, for instance, if you've been given it for your part in a brand new musical? But kind of where's your first point of call, as it were?
Oh, that's so interesting. Well, I think I would just come home and sit at the piano and get the melody of whatever I've got to do in my head, so that when it comes to working through the song with the MD, possibly the composer might be in the room or not, and everybody might have their own take, and you sort of find your way. And I hope I'm reasonably good at reading the room to sort of know how far you can say, oh, could we try this, or whether that's not on the table at all. I think my experience of new work has been that they do want to know what you have to say or what you think, because you're the one who's going to have to get up there and put the song across. I mean, I did a new musical that went to Edinburgh that had never been done before, and on that the MD and I just were sort of on the same page, and there was a bit that just was a little bit didn't quite work musically, and so we sort of collectively found another way to do it, and the composer was happy with that. But the composer might easily have said, no, I want it done this way. So I think you kind of feel your way as to how much you can bend things. And also I think the director has a part to play as well. You know, when you first get it on its legs and you've learnt the music, you might still be on book, but you're not having to read notes. And you start to find your way. Sometimes things change again, and it's a sort of organic process, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose it's like it's the same, isn't it? Being in a play for the first time and you get a big speech, you have to own that speech, no matter how much direction and etc. is involved. So I guess it's the same with the song. That the first time you go out there, let's say you've been doing your show in Edinburgh for 3 weeks, and then suddenly the song inflates to something brand new. Have you found that? Is there
oh my goodness, but we had, this was more of a blocking thing, but it was also in the performance as well. When I was in Edinburgh doing this particular show, the director, we had a thing in rehearsal where it was a false exit, if you know what I mean. You know, I nearly went and then I didn't. And unexpectedly in Edinburgh, they just started, clapping on this false exit. So then you've got to go, oh my God, I've got to get them back because I've got another verse. I'm back. And that negotiating all that is new, because of course not only is the musical new to you, it's also new to them. It's not like your example of Kiss Me Kate, it's not like that where the audience all know that there's another verse. This was all new, and that was very interesting, and how that informs what happens naturally with the performance as you go along, but then of course you don't want to fall into that awful trap of expecting it. Oh, here we go, I'm going to do the false exit, and they're all going, oh no, they're not. So that's another challenge.
It'd be interesting if you ever see somebody sing the song that you originated, as it were. It'd be interesting to see the interpretation, wouldn't it?
I know, that would be really, really interesting. That would be really, really interesting. And it's sort of, I do remember changing little things in rehearsal on that particular show. And luckily everybody was up for that. It was all sort of organic and sort of came together, and the composer was happy for that to happen. And I've not been in a situation where the composer has said, no, I want it like this. But you know what? We're hired hands. If I was in that situation, I would just do what comes together during rehearsal, you know?
That's interesting, because you kind of paving the way for what I was going to say next, which the question was, have you found when you've done new musicals, is there still space in the room for you to reconstruct what's been made? Or is it, do you find that musicals can be more compacted? Because with a play, if you've got the playwright in the room, they can change words or whatever. But is that still possible with changing of music and words and songs, etc., when it's a musical?
Oh, I think so, because I think when you're at the rehearsal point, it's not like, it's like everything is still slightly up for grabs. Yes, there might be orchestrations that are floating about, but things are still, everyone is still finding their way. So yes, I think within reason there is room for moving things about, you know. And then of course you know, cuts, you know, that always happens, doesn't it? You know, we all know that from plays as much as musicals, that it might just be, oh, it's running a bit long, we'll have to lose that verse, you know, and that might have been your favorite verse, but that's life. Isn't it, you know?
Yeah. And then when
yeah, I think so.
And now that you've done a few musicals, have you found that you've been able to have a little bit of agency over to help, you know, over the theatre making process in the room? Have you been able to offer your experience in that space as well? I suppose it depends.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? I don't know. You hope that at least somebody would like to know what you thought. I think again, it depends who's in the room. I've been lucky that I've worked with a few directors more than once on musicals. So of course, once you've already worked with someone and they work with you again, there's a shorthand, isn't there? And they'll go, well, they just know your way of working and that you're up for that or whatever, you know. So I've been lucky like that, I think, that it's not, and also it's not like it used to be when I first started as an actress. You sort of just did what you were told. And I think these days, particularly younger directors I work with, are much more, what does everybody think, you know, and that's lovely. I love that, and that's very nice. And a change. But you know, years ago I remember doing jobs where you literally just did what you were told, and that was just the way it was.
Yeah, it's still out there.
We're in a different landscape now.
Yes. Just thinking about, if somebody's watching this and they're writing a brand new musical and, you know, about to get it off the ground, what type of advice could you offer, do you think, in talking about, you know, including the performers in the room, just thinking of that ideology you just listed there? What do you reckon? How can they embrace that?
I think ultimately theatre is a collaborative process, inevitably, because you've got lots of different elements all coming together to do their bit to make a show. So I think it's the same old thing. It's listening, it's, you know, taking into consideration everybody's input. I think that's all really important. And also just, I think, if this doesn't sound too awful, don't be too precious about it. Don't set it in stone too much in your head, because things change. And I think it's really important in all theatre and in all rehearsal spaces to just be open to whatever ends up happening somehow. I think.
Yeah. In your experience then, because you will have done new plays as well, I'd imagine, over your career.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are musicals harder, new musicals harder to stage? Or are they just different? Or
well, there's just a lot more going on. Just inevitably, because it's a music, because it's, you've got music, you've got, you know, you've got to learn the dots, then the words, and then there's blocking, and then there might be dancing. So there's just a lot more going on. So you're a lot more, you know, plates are being spun, but you just get round to that. And also these days with shorter rehearsal times, you've got to do a lot of work on your own, really, in a way that, well, I mean, obviously if you're doing a big West End musical, you would have plenty of time to rehearse, but smaller scale things, obviously you've got to get cracking quite quickly and be kind of on it. And that's why I'm always so grateful that I can play the piano, because it just helps so much when you're learning the music. Because I think until you've learned the music, you can't really start on anything else. the music's got to come first. Then what they call note bashing has to come first. Get the note bashing out of the way. And then at least if you're wandering around with a book, at least it's the book rather than the score. You know, what you really can't do is walk around with the score and the book and you're just carting around all this paper. So I think, you know, just do your homework and be ready in the room. And be up for play. You know, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah. So I guess it's the same as, you know, learn your lines as soon as you can, really, because then once you get, there's a sense of freedom, isn't there? Once you've kind of got it in your skin, and if it's really there, you start to adjust.
Completely. I just think, you know, do as much work as you can so that when you're in the room, you can move it on to the next point.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? Although I find when I'm doing plays, if there's time, obviously, because sometimes you've got to get cracking and be off book as soon as possible. If I really like the in plays more than musicals, this is the sense that the blocking makes sense with the lines. You know, I'm over here, therefore it's this, and oh yes, and there are you, and I'm saying this. And I like that process, but sometimes you don't have that luxury, do you?
Yeah.
And the same is sort of true of musicals, although it's different with musicals because once you've learnt the dots, the words generally have gone in as well because they go together so much, you know.
So bonus question then before we wrap up.
Okay.
New musicals, which ones have you rated in the past couple of years for you? What do you go, oh, that?
Ooh.
I know it's a horrible hard question.
Now I'm going to have to name names.
Just give, you can name. I mean, I'll give you one. I think London Road and Matilda are brilliant. I thought they were excellent.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yes. You know, are there any new? No,
I think Matilda was wonderful. I would love to see what Tim Minchin might do next.
Yeah.
Gosh, I just don't know. And also, we've been in such a weird period. I haven't seen a musical. I've been in one during lockdown, but I haven't seen one in quite a while. So it's a tricky question.
But you rate Matilda. That's interesting. But just a little fun fact about Matilda is they had 6 months of development.
There you go.
With the cast.
There you go. Yes, because I worked with an actor who was originally the children were going to be played by grown-ups.
Right.
When first in development of the RSC, it was going to be grown-ups, and he was one of the kids. He was one of the kids originally, and then they jumped all that and decided to actually have kids.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
I know it was a long period, and it can be a lot. It can be a long process, and that's okay, isn't it?
I think it's needed. I think musicals are just such a complicated, complex beast to stage.
There's so much going on, and then also you might have a situation where there's a sort of hole where a song needs to go, and maybe the song that's been written isn't quite there, or perhaps doesn't quite work for the actor who is playing that part and might need tweaking. I mean, there's just so much to deal with.
Never underestimate the musical.
No, I think that's true. But I really like new work, and I get excited in the room when you think, oh gosh, what am I going to do with it? And I like that process.
Yeah.
I quite like I can't find it on YouTube and listen to how it goes. It's sort of exciting.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much, Virge. You're a star.
Thank you for having me, Russell.